Welcome to post number 20 in Advice for Life. We had talked some time ago about the reality and your relationship to it. If you remember, we talked about language as sacred and powerful. And we talked about you, the I, thou, and the I, other. And we talked about reification, and we talked about science versus the garden in the question of reality in relation to yourself and to the denial of reality as evil. So we're going to talk today about something we did not really mention in that 5-pointed star diagram, as you can see. And what we really did not talk about is this culture. So let's talk about your relationship to culture and morals and ethics. What exactly does that mean? Well, I have another chart for you, this chart here. And as you can see, it is a series of umbrellas. At the bottom is the umbrella of your family. It's the circle. That is your family of origin. The little umbrella above it is you and relationship to family. That is your culture. Then above that, we have you and the culture of your country. That is an umbrella of values which overrides your individual family culture. And then moving on up in the level of linguistics and culture, we have you and the general culture of the world in which we live. And the last umbrella of ethics and morals is the ultimate reality, absolute reality, the ethics and morals which override every other form of cultural conditioning. Now, the question becomes, for which behaviors are we morally responsible? Which ethics are we accountable for, and which are we not? So let's begin with the original family culture, the circle. We grow up in a family, we learn their values, we accept them blindly, and that's natural. Children don't have any term of comparison for other forms of reality, and so they will accept the family culture. If that family culture includes abuse, they will accept the abuse as normal. It's normative. If the family culture is a culture of, say, theft and violence, young children will not understand the difference. So we are, as children, a product of our family. But we also begin with age to develop a sense of our own culture, of our own ideas and our own values. They often will not differ from our original family culture, but with time, we eventually may become more discerning and reject those aspects of our family culture which were harmful or which we deemed unhealthy or hurtful or not productive. And so very often, if there are abused members in the family, abused members of any sort, sexual, physical, emotional, psychological, even intellectual abuse, we can, and at times, see this objectively. It's called discernment. And we can overcome that original family culture by developing and growing beyond it. That creates a problem, though, with ambivalence, because we love our family of origin. We love our parents, and yet we have to reject some of their behaviors, some of their beliefs and cultures because, sorry, the bell just rang. We have to reject, quiet. We have to reject some of their beliefs and cultures because they were negative or wrong, basically wrong, and yet we still feel love. So we're experiencing what we call ambivalence. This was one of the original posts, which was ambivalence, when you have two opposite feelings at the same time for someone. For instance, your parents, you can love them, and at the same time you reject things that they believed in, and you might resent them. You might be resentful of their leading you down the wrong path for so long. So we have to deal with elements of ambivalence, and I will get into ambivalence later on. I'm trying to concentrate despite the dogs and the bell. So moving on from the individual culture, which we learn to establish, then we have the overriding culture of our country. Like an umbrella, it covers over and dominates our family culture. So if you grow up in a family culture which affirms the country culture, you are doubly brainwashed. That can be a good thing, but it can also be a very bad thing. For instance, if you grow up in a culture where it's okay to stone women to death by burying them up to their chest in the ground and throwing stones at them until they're dead, and that's okay, not only in your family, and you probably saw it happen, horror of horrors, but it's also okay in your general country culture to do that, well, then you are completely brainwashed, but you accept that as a valid value. And it's very difficult to undo a culture. Laws can be passed, much can be attempted in overcoming the negative aspects of some country cultures. But it's a long, hard journey, and it's one that needs to be done. Every country has negative values in their culture, including America. We have a culture of addiction, of drugs and alcohol. We have a culture of death and violence. Let me give you an example. In America and in England, in both cases, there was an individual who went on the street threatening people with a sword or a machete. In America, the police surrounded him and shot him to death immediately. In England, they shot him in the legs to stop him. He survived. We always seem to work toward the extreme reaction, life and death. We're a violent country, and that's part of our culture. We have a culture of addiction to drugs and alcohol. We don't seem to know how to enjoy ourselves or other people without a buzz on. So that's something that needs to be addressed in our culture. What I'm trying to say here is try to overcome and, first of all, to see and recognize the negative aspects in your particular culture. It could be machismo. It could be mamismo. These are all values that are taken to an extreme and can be damaging to your lives, damaging to your happiness. So if you live in a culture, for instance, the Southern Italian culture, some of the cultures in Western Europe, where to be a mother is to be a saint no matter how badly you behave, and then to be a single woman, unmarried, is to be judged harshly and treated as an outsider. So these are things that can severely affect a person's happiness, especially if a man In a mamismo culture, marries a woman, she's going to have a hard time with the family very often in certain cultures. And it takes a strong man to be able to see through that. It takes a strong woman to be able to see through that. So, and the culture in China, for instance, and I'm not trying to be harsh. America has negative aspects too. In China, the horrible habit of eating animals alive, of cooking them alive. I'll never be able to unsee a video of a medium-sized dog hung by the neck with its legs still on the ground and burned with a blowtorch, starting with the face, in order to cook it while it was alive. These are horrible, horrible things. I saw a whale being caught and a giant saw used to slice it up alive. Instead of starting at the head and severing the spinal cord so the fish wouldn't be in pain, they started at the tail and chopped it up slowly all the way up to the head. These are horrible things, but the culture turns a blind eye to that because every culture, including the American culture, needs to grow up and change. The world is like a single person. It needs to develop, and every country is like a single person. The group consciousness, it's as if it were an individual that needs to develop and grow spiritually and humanely. So passing beyond the country culture and all its defects and possibilities, we then enter into the world culture, the general culture. The general culture is the group culture of all the families, all the individuals, all the local cultures, all the country cultures to form a world consciousness. The world consciousness together actually creates a form of consciousness that embraces or condemns certain behaviors. That world consciousness is also, think of it as a developing child, a developing entity that must grow and develop and learn. Now, no culture is perfect. There are pros and cons in all cultures, and cultures can be at war with each other. In America, the culture of freedom, independence, the right to free speech, respect for others, that culture is at war now with a counterculture of violence, abuse, discrimination, racism, misogyny, greed. We are in a spiritual war in our culture in America today. So where do you go to find the ultimate truth? How do you know what is ethical and what is wrong? Where do you turn? If you can't trust your own culture, you can't trust your local culture, you can't trust your country culture 100%. The world culture is a battlefield of ideas and concepts of what's right and wrong. Where do you turn? And that's when we get to the biggest umbrella of all. The umbrella, the biggest umbrella of all, that overrides all the other umbrellas. And that umbrella is the umbrella of the ethics and morality of absolute reality. We talked about this before. Absolute reality. Reality, the ultimate reality, is the ultimate good. Anything that denies reality at any level, any culture that reifies or treats anyone as an object without rights, those actions are evil. And a culture that embraces that kind of discrimination, racism or misogyny, that culture has a strong evil component. And there's no justification for the individual not to reflect upon whether he or she would willingly undergo the same treatment that he or she is meting out to others. That's what we need to look at. Would it be okay for you to be treated that way? If it's not okay, if you're not willing to put up with that kind of treatment, then you should not be dishing it out to anybody for any reason. And so we come to ultimate reality, the reality of ethics and morals that override cultures, countries, individuals, the law of love, the law of kindness, the law of ethics, the law of morals, where every single living creature has a right to happiness and not to suffer. Don't be a cause of anyone else's suffering. If you think you have the right to kill another human being in any way, then you are evil. And that is the truth. So choose your culture carefully, be discerning, try to reflect on your life. Don't just blindly go ahead with pre-assumptions without looking deeply into things. So this is the end of the series on reality. And this is post number 20 in my page, Advice for Life. And we'll be moving on to other relationship subjects in the next post. Have a lovely weekend. Bye.